All right. Hi, everybody, for anyone who's here yet. Okay. Bear with me, I'm trying to get my camera lined up here. Alrighty, hopefully this is a little clearer than last time. Well, hi Kayla. Sorry, I've got my, let me move my other tablet. That way I actually see. Kaya, I'm sorry, I hope I said that right. I can't, I've got my other tablet here trying to see when people join, and I can barely read text. I see your hello, though. Hi. All right, so this is an old painting. You might be able to see it in my tablet right up here. It's pretty old. It's over 100 years old, past copyright law, so I don't have to worry about that. My client has asked me to replicate it. So I've already started. You may see some of the cloud work over here. I've got some of the greenery going down here. And I'm actually going to work on the tree area here. So I've moved some of the cloud work in. So I'll go ahead and get started here. Actually, let me put some medium out. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Alrighty. Oh, where did I do my little medium jar? I actually keep a jar that, and I just do these layer on top of layer, but this has got copal medium in it. And this is one of those types that pops open, has a seal, so excuse the way it looks. It just hardens and I just top it off. I don't use much, just a very small amount, because it frankly doesn't take very much. And when I'm done, I'll just close the top and it'll be waterproof. Alright, let me get that set aside here. Okay, hi Erin. Thank you for joining me again. So I'm going to start on the tree work here. I've already got some of the sky back here so I can work around it. I do need to do some color corrections on the sky, so I'm probably going to do a little bit of that. But let me just go ahead and get my paintbrush. We'll just get going here. So I'm going to start off with a larger round. This one is a stiffer bristle. Let me move my tablet a little bit here. Hope you can see it a little better. Unfortunately, I can't get it down too far. Alright, so anytime you're doing a painting, you want to think about what's the furthest away from you, what's medium ground, and what's closer. So this is just, you know, it's a very slapped together right now because I'm going to go back over layers later. I always think about it in layers. So I want to get as much color down as I can. So here's the horizon line. This is a bunch of trees over here. We've got 3 horses and a man sitting here. I don't know if you can see him. This painting is pretty old. I want to say maybe Dutch. I'm not sure. There's another bunch of trees here. Actually, they come over this far. But because there's a lot of leaf work and limbs, I went ahead and did some of this area into it. So I could work over it instead of having to work around the tree branches. So I'm going to go ahead and start building this area, and I've actually got too much blue here in these areas. I will tone those down with washes later, so I'm not that worried that it's too bright right now, because it'll also let me color match a little bit better once I start having those colors down. So let me grab this really quick so I can show you. I've zoomed in a little bit. Here is what the original painting looks like. And you can see that the furthest trees are the muddier colored ones, and back here at this corner, right there, and further over here. So we're going to work on those today for now. It may go fairly quickly, it may not, sometimes it does. All right, get that situated here. All right, hopefully everybody can hear me okay. If not, somebody type something. Okay. Well, if somebody type something if you can hear me. All right, now, so I'm looking at those colors. What I'm seeing is primarily a base of a purplish blue. A great one for that is the dioxazine purple. I'm going to start off with that. It's really muddied down, so I'm going to use another color that I love to use for muddying things down, and that will be, I don't know if you can see this, this is flesh tint color. Thank you, Josie, I appreciate it. So this is a flesh tint. It works really beautiful, and you're gonna laugh when you see my palette. I get a little tired of switching palettes back and forth when I'm working on multiple, hi Morgan, when I'm working on multiple paintings, and I use my freezer to keep them, so my palettes actually will last for 2, 3, 4 weeks, and I work on multiple projects. So here's what my palette looks like. I know, crazy, right? It's got every color you can think of, but my gosh, the amount of mixtures and color variations I can get is ridiculous, and I am lazy. These are also, look at the size of my finger compared to these. They're very small. I waste very little paint overall, so anyway, so let me show you what it looks like. I've got, this is dioxazine purple, and this is the flesh tint, and if I start to mix this in, you'll see how it actually cools it down quite a bit. And because I need it to be a little bit more muddy, this is where I like to use black most of the time, just to muddy it down, because it not only darkens, it actually muddies a bit. I'm using small amounts. I always tap a little bit off the side, so if I get too much I can clear it down. So wish I could bring the other thing down, but this actually matches the color that's up there. Dot much? Yeah, right? Alright, so you can see I actually put down very little. It's because I'm going to do this in layers, knowing full well that I'm going to come back later. Oh, let me get my copal medium. So my copal medium, it's a drying agent, but it also helps move the paint around. So let me get this going here. I'm looking at my reference image first, make sure I'm centered. And I'm just going to start dabbing a bit here and there. Let me get a little bit more of my copal medium, because what it does is not only dry, but it's going to give me some movement of the color. And let me do one more thing. Grab just a tiny bit of green. I know that sounds a little crazy, but it also helps muddy things down just a bit. So now I've got my color here. I fully expect to do some other colors on top, but I'm going to go darker first. Okay, and because these are just kind of like little wild branches going every which way, I'm just going to turn my brush and just move on in here. Periodically, something I'll also do is I'll use a dry brush. I love dry brushing. And if I need an area that's got a little bit of color, I'll come in and just soften things up a little bit. It'll take some of the marks away. I don't really need it for this part. I just wanted to show you that. All right, so back to this. Oh, I need more copal. I'll go through it kind of quick because it dries very quickly. All right. So I'm just using some round motions here so I don't get too much of the brush shape. I'm keeping to the darker areas right now because I'm going to bring in lighter areas later. And I want some random shapes and forms because I'm mimicking somebody else's style here. And then just a touch more purple. There we go. Start bringing in some other colors. For this, I like to work as much as I can wet on wet. So I'll just pull in different colors here and there as I go, warming it up, cooling it off. By warming it up, I mean warmer tones like your reds or your browns, cooling it off meaning the greens and blues generally. Oh, bear with me one second, I'm just doing some mixture here. I hear one of my puppies getting frustrated at me. I've had to lock her inside because she keeps going outside and barking while everybody walks their dogs. Alright, one more second, just mixing some different colors. I'll tell you about them once I get them pulled up. There we are. Just a little red for that. Okay, so there's some very soft kind of pinkish brown areas that have just a little bit of purple in them. I'm mixing that right now. There we go. Oh, thank you, Erin. This is oil paint. This is one of multiple projects I'm working on right now, so I thought it'd be nice to show you something a little bit different. I'm going to go back to the pastel work that you've seen me working on probably tomorrow while I give this some time to dry and cure up a little bit. And again, I'm just working a little bit darker right now because I'm going to come back over it with light colors at another stage for the sake of giving it some depth. And just some vague movements here. Where's my other one? There we go. I don't need it to be anything too special right now. This is just to get some color down in some areas where the sky is already shining through. Get some purple in. It's just going to take a little while before this actually looks like a whole lot, so do bear with me on that. It will come together fairly quick though, once I start getting some color in. In this case, the sun's coming from this direction where there's warmer colors. I just need splotches right now of color. Okay. Start bringing in some blues here and there too. Hi, Rachel. This is going to, like I said, it's going to take a little bit for it to look like anything much, so do bear with me. I'm just working on wet just to kind of gently blend the color together. Keep in mind that here, let me zoom up just a hair so you can see the original picture with this in there. Oh, bear with me, I'm trying to get this to sit still. All right. Hopefully that'll sit tight. Sorry, it's a aluminum arm, so it doesn't always like to move. All right, hopefully you can see that a bit better with the original. It just doesn't want to sit there. Oh, sorry, dismissed that. That was my reminder to stop what I was doing, make sure I was painting. And it still doesn't. Hold on one second, guys. Sorry, my aluminum arm has been overused and it's weakening. There we are. Okay. Hopefully that's better. Alright, so continue building in those colors. And there's going to be periods of time when I'm going to add in a lot of dark color to help bring in some of that depth. Alright, is that any better? See it sinking down again. Let me try this one more time, guys. Okay. I'm going to use it to block itself in. Oh my gracious, this thing, I tell you what, it's old. Okay, how about that? Hopefully that's better. Okay, and I'm going to pay attention to some of these sticks and branches that are up here and try to mimic those as much as I can. Just not sure how to make this where you guys can see it better. It just keeps folding down on me. Oh, do you? Thanks, Josie. At least it's not just me. I'd say maybe if I just zoom in, that might help you see the area I'm working on a little better. I need to warm up some of the tones, but I know I'm going to come back on it to make it softer. So I'm not that terribly worried about any problems right now. I just need color down here. And I know this is going to be yellowy orange, and this is going to be dark back here, so I'm going to go ahead and start adding that in. I don't need it to be perfect, just needs to be splotchy. And there will be other colors on top. Alright, now there is a bit of a olive green tone in there too, so I'm going to start going ahead and bringing some of that in. And it'll darken this up without using black. So I just need some variety. I'm paying attention to some of the marks that are already on the old one. I don't need it to be perfect right now, just good enough. Okay, maybe that way. Sorry guys. Unfortunately, you can't see how it's actually going to turn out until you've started the process. Isn't that exciting? Alright, so I'm trying to keep some of the warmer temperature things going here. Bear with me one second while I mix some more color. I'm using Vaxazine Purple, Flesh Tint, and just a little bit of, this may sound crazy, Cerulean Blue. Cerulean Blue does an amazing job of muting down red colors. Let me show you what I mean. So there's my cerulean, and here's my blue, or my Flesh Tint I was talking about. Watch when I mix that in how much it mutes it. Isn't that beautiful? Just mutes it right down. It's where you pay attention to where everything is on your color wheel. Alright, so back to this. Hopefully you can see that okay. It's very difficult mimicking somebody else's painting style, especially with how different this is than mine. Uh-oh, it fell down. Sorry guys, hold on. Don't mind my messiness. It's an art room. It gets messy. Alright, try this another way. One more time. Stay. Okay, yellow guys, stay. I think we're good now. What a pain. What a pain. I'm trying to pay attention to the way this guy's strokes go too. There we go. Sorry about all that. I know it's just moving everywhere. Get some more blue in there. Let's try this one. There we are. So further things are away, the more blue they are. Just a gentle touch here. It's the color that'll mostly help it appear like leaves. So once I get some of the color bases down, what's going to happen is when I come back in with other colors on top, it'll actually make it fit together better. But I have to be patient with myself. It's so tempting to want to jump ahead and try to make it look exactly like it's supposed to right now. But I know that's not the case. Where's my other one? Alright, there you are. And let me know anytime, guys, if you have any questions. I'll be happy to answer anything that I can. Bear with me because I'm just mixing some colors here. Here we are, almost done. Okay. I wanted to get a little bit softer of a blue in a couple places. I'm using a different brush. This one's an old filbert. It's got a little texture to it. But I'm kind of squeezing this into some of the spaces I left before. I'm working them in rather than just sticking them on top or anything. I actually just want it to cool off some of the areas that I have here, but they'll stand out better with the white spaces than where the spots have already cooled off, or already painted on, excuse me. And again, bear in mind, I'm coming back over this later with some more color. This is just layer 1. It'll have at least 2 layers, maybe 3 in some areas. Oops, here's another color. Where'd you go? Aha, gotcha. All right. It's a very alien feeling painting on somebody else's style. I'm just not used to it. I've already done one painting for this from this guy for my client, and you can find that in my what do you call it? The page for Instagram. It's probably the technical word. Who knows? But yeah, these look dramatically different once you finish. If my camera wiggles, forgive me, it's my dog Poppy. She's gotten nosy. She's good at that. And I think she's found some fish food I dropped earlier. You can probably hear my aquarium in the background. Bear with me 1 second. Just mixing. Puppy, what are you doing? Okay. Oh, see, my brush is starting to get a little dry, so I'm getting out some of that cocoa medium again. Mixing. Okay. Now, back to it. You can see it flows much better when you've got the copal medium. I'm trying to preserve where I know some of this orange is going to go, because I'm going to get into it a little bit, but it's so that I can remember where my markings are. Oh, Poppy. Sorry, she bumped it. I knew she would. She's very, very good at that. Alright, a little bit more purpley. There's going to be areas that are darker, so I'm just going to go ahead and start working some of those in. There's also some very green areas, and those will come in last. Well, where did I go? Unfortunately, copal dries off pretty quickly. Oh, but I love it. Yes, I do use watercolor. Not that often anymore. I used to use it quite a bit, just because. But I can actually treat my oils like watercolors in a lot of ways. In fact, if anyone hasn't tried it, I strongly encourage you to try out oil paint on paper. It's interesting because you're not using things like linseed oil. I actually, and this is going to sound a little crazy, but it works, I swear, is gun oil. And what you do is you just use a tiny amount of gun oil on your brush, dip it in the color that you want for your watercolor, for your oil, and it brushes on just like, it's like liquid charcoal. That's what it looks like. It's really cool. And the best part of all is you can actually erase it up until the point where it sets. You can get some very fine line work. I mean, it really looks just like pencil and charcoal. So if you haven't ever tried it, it's worth trying just for fun. Watercolor paper is all you need to do it. Okay, I'm trying to avoid some of the areas that I know need some white and blue in them. You can see it does kind of look watercolorish, which is what I want for this stage, because this is something that's further away in the distance. It's got a lot of texture, and some of the color will come back in later. I'm not too worried if I mess up a spot that should be light, that should have sky behind it, because it's oil. I can paint over it. Not a big deal. But I am using around just because it has such versatility right now. if I were to come in with a filbert or anything else, they would have too much of an obvious edge, and I don't want that at the moment. I'm going to add just a touch of green in here in a couple places and just start bringing that in. I know the color doesn't quite look the same probably on your end than it does for mine. One of these days here soon I'm going to figure out how to make the video quality better. Don't know just yet. Working on that. If anyone has any suggestions as far as how to make the video quality better, let me know. Right now I'm using a Samsung Note 9. And although I like the camera on it quite a bit, I don't know if it's my internet. I've got it set to 5G. I'm not sure why it's not picking up more detail work. Okay. I'm just using, and since this isn't my style, it's very different. So I'm trying to mimic the brush strokes that I see on the screen here as much as I can, which he gets very blotchy in places, the original artist. Grabbing some copal medium, I'm coming back in with a little bit more red in a couple places. And what I'll do as I get to later stages, I will actually do my marks, step back, take a look, turn it upside down, see how I feel about an area, if it looks like it matches. In fact, one of the things I frequently do is I'll take pictures with my phone, and I have a collage app that I've added, and I'll put the original on top and my painting on bottom so that I can actually see and compare the two. And I may do this again tomorrow and continue work on the leopard. For right now, I needed to get some more work done on this. I had finally had time for the other area that I painted already to dry. Got a lot of vertical marks kind of here, and then there's some blue. Get the blue in here, and this just signifies branches that are further away, basically. This is got cerulean blue, small amount of black, bit of white, and just a tiny amount of cobalt violet as far as the color. So, you know, I get lazy when it comes to painting, when it comes to mixing. I like having all the colors out and available so I can just jump back and forth in every which way, work on different paintings. I don't have to be stuck with one painting at a time. I can come back to, you know, one or the other later, not have to switch out from a lower palette that has just minimalist colors. Like I know a lot of people like those, but I think they're great. I used to enjoy them all the time too, but frankly I got tired of having to redo my palette all the time. Alright, almost to a stage where I want to start adding in the orange. There we go. Start adding a little bit of it. Get some darks in here. By the way, I keep a, this is just paper towels that I keep folded up right on my leg so I can wipe my brush off quickly. I know, nothing too exciting right now. But as this painting progresses, you should see a lot of the same styles coming out. So I like to go in and match as close as I can certain marks. It's just, at this stage, I'm just trying to get some general tones down. Okay, start moving into some of the yellows and orange. Sorry, mixing. I'm just doing in a darker shade right now because my goal is to come back in with something really bright over it later, not tonight. But this will make, because it's a similar color, when I come back in with a bright color later, it's going to make it pop like crazy. Let's see, any top tips for oil painting? I work in acrylics, but would love to work with oils. Oh, you would love it. I can actually, this that I'm doing actually will be dry before I need to sit down next time I sit here. The ways that you can make this dry quicker is to, now not everybody suggests this is just my method of working, so you don't have to hold true to this, but I work a lot thinner because it instead of doing thin to thick, I do thin to thin. So when it comes to oil, you have to think about how things dry. So if you're doing really thick, that should be your top layers, sort of thickest, with thin being the lowest layers, because otherwise you'll get cracking. I use copal medium. Let me find it. All right, hopefully you can see this Grumbacher copal medium. I love this. It's a drying agent that gives your oils flow. And then there's, let me grab this one. Liquid Original. It's fantastic. This one is Winsor Newton, and it does similar to the copal, but the copal seems to dry a lot faster, I've found lately, and has a little bit of a different smell, more of a minty smell than the god-awful smell that you get from Liquid Original. But Liquid's always been one of my tried and trues. So it'll dry a lot faster, and you can paint wet on wet to get things to blend quickly. Just place colors side by side like you're probably used to with acrylic, and then you can just come over with a dry brush and just blend things together. You can see how that blends, and you can get a color mixture that way. As far as other tips, I'm trying to think with the as far as palette, it's great to you can freeze it versus refrigerator, but if you freeze your palette, something to keep in mind is water and oil do not go along, right? What they'll wind up doing is separating later. It won't be obvious at first, but it will happen, so you have to have faith that that's going to happen. So the trick around that is if you let it sit out for about an hour, it will evaporate all of the moisture in an hour, and then it's just gone. You don't have to worry about it anymore. So now, instead of having to worry about wasting a bunch of paint or having issues with it drying out, now instead I can work very quickly. I can just do something else for an hour, like fix dinner, eat, work on another drawing, which I sometimes do, play with the dogs. You get the idea. And so it makes things a lot easier in that way. There's some of it that's opaque and some of it that's translucent. Knowing which is which, you just have to pay attention. They'll actually say a lot of the times translucent on the tube itself. But whenever you mix it down with thinner or liquid or copal medium, either one, you can do what's called glazing, where you do just a dry brush with that color over it, whatever you've had before. Now, whatever's on there before needs to be completely dry. Then you do your glazing, and it will actually change and darken the color or alter the color that you've got on there already. So it's pretty fantastic. It's so flexible, and the fact that you can see through it to the lower layers really gives life to things. It gives it more of a glow. But you can also get extreme detail just like you do with acrylic. So you want to always, I suggest gloves because there are chemicals involved that are not very safe. So you have to keep that in mind too. I wear gloves anytime I'm working in oils. Do not put your brushes in your mouth. That can be very tempting. And never use turpentine to clean your hands off, ever. Anybody that does that works in oils, please never do that. What happens is you get a chemical reaction, and what occurs is it actually puts it reduces the size of the bad molecules down to where it can even pass through capillaries and go into your bloodstream and store in your brain. Keep in mind, there's only a handful of paints that do that. You're looking for things that say cadmium, titanium, and what was the other one? It's mostly just cadmiums that are the biggest risk, but some of the whites, but there's not that many of those colors that are actually a problem to worry about. But so long as you take those precautions, then you won't have any issues. Gloves, wash your hands with soap and water. Any dish soap works fantastic for it. Then you don't have to worry. You won't have any issues. Let's see, what else tip-wise? They always say don't mix with your brushes. I'm terrible at that. I love mixing with the brushes. I just wipe off the excess. Let's see. Forgive me, because oh, I know one that's a big one that's one of my favorites. This is a rigger liner, and I'm holding my finger so you can see it because this one's white. What I use this for is fur work, not because it's round, but because whenever if I do paint on either side, opposite sides exactly, I get a chiseled edge that it's as fine as, it's razor blade fine as far as the edge that I get, and I can get the tiniest line work, and it will hold the line, the edge for several marks. So that's fantastic. I always love those. They're very long, very thin, round brushes is what they are. Let's see if I can find another one. I have a bunch of them, actually. This one, I'm going to grab it. If you look in my gallery, you'll see a black and white lion. It's 30 inches by 15 inches, and this is the brush that I actually use for almost the entire thing. So, scary, right? But yeah, it gets you a really nice chiseled edge. One of my favorite brushes. Another great one is the dagger striper, which is this beauty, because you can use it not only like this, with just the tip itself on its side, or the tip. I mean, it does so much. I use those a lot for a lot of line work, like for grasses, trees, things like that. And I keep a lot of my old brushes even when they're really worn down, because oh my gosh, when they're damaged, they are fantastic for things like grass work. I hope that answered your question. If there's any particulars you want to know when it comes to oils, let me know. Alright. Also, here's one. If you have a translucent color like an orange that you need to be less translucent, adding just a tiny amount of white will actually, because white is not translucent, it is opaque. And so what it'll do is actually take that orange a little bit brighter, but it will make it opaque versus translucent by just using just a little bit. That's all it takes. And get a little more purple in that. There we are. And I also find when it comes to painting, whether it be acrylics or oils, prepping that canvas in the first place is quite frankly one of your biggest saving graces, because the more texture that you have on the canvas, the harder that the more paint that it takes away from your brush. And you'll go through paint a lot faster needlessly. So I do a lot of prep work on my canvases. In this case, this is just a panel because I needed to fit a very peculiar size for this one. But if you do several gesso layers, and when you're doing the gesso, what I do is I do a layer going with my brush going up one direction, and as it's drying, I just do like this constantly. And it actually creates a weave in the acrylic base gesso so that it gets a really good solid grip on the canvas. It fills in the holes. It really does a beautiful job. And when I get a smoother surface on that canvas, my brush carries further. I get better line work. I mean, it really makes a huge difference, and the time that it takes to do things too. So I strongly encourage prepping that canvas. If you overdo the gesso, just sand it down pretty good, and it will take good care of you. It'll make your brushes and your paint go further than you thought it would. All right. Well, hi Beverly. Glad you could join us. As I've told the others, I'm working on a painting that's actually a reproduction from an artist from over 100 years ago. This is a commission piece, and I do have permission to share this, so no worries. But yeah, I'm just replicating somebody else's style, very different from my own if you've seen my gallery. But it's fun. It's always a nice challenge to do something that's out of the norm. And right now I'm just getting colors down because I'm going to be doing additional layers on top of this to better color match certain areas and get some of the more matching line work in here. But right now I'm just trying to get some colors in. Working a little bit wet on wet, as they say. I've already got a lot of the sky in. Oh, thank you so much, Josie. I'm glad you're enjoying that. Hopefully I was able to answer your question right. There's, I always think of more things to share when I'm actually working. So I'll be doing more of these. I really enjoy doing these and answering questions. I get a lot of enjoyment out of it. So keep an eye open anytime that you are on, and I like to do these in the afternoon. And as I'm coming across other techniques that I remember to share, I will be happy to do so. I'm trying to get some more blue in here because there's actually quite a bit of blue in this section. The blue that I'm using is a Prussian blue. My favorite colors to use for sky, I have 3 that I love. My best one is cerulean blue. I mix it down with white. Sometimes I'll add in just a tiny touch of flesh tone. I know that sounds crazy, but it dulls it down a little bit so it's not overwhelming. It's not too bright. And then my other favorite being phthalo blue. In fact, phthalo blues are my favorite colors when I'm mixing black. If anyone has ever mixed their own black, I know everybody has their own variation, but my favorite is I use either phthalo blue or French ultramarine, depending on how blue I want it. Like if I'm going to put it in a shadow area, for instance. If it's going into shadow, I'll use French ultramarine. If it's just a regular black, I'll use phthalo. Phthalo is really dark. I'll mix that with alizarin crimson and burnt umber. Those 3 together make the richest black that I've ever seen. If I'm doing something that's more of a black that's in a more lighting area that might have more of a warm tone, I'll use more alizarin crimson or burnt umber. If I'm doing something in a cooler area, then I use more blue. But I often really just use black for mixing in and dulling a color down when it's too vibrant. And oh, bless your heart. Well, I'll try to put some at a time that works better for you, because I actually have quite a few people who follow me from the UK, so I'll try to do that sometime, maybe on the weekend. Oh, art competitions! Heck yeah! I strongly encourage going into art competitions wherever it is. Look ahead at the start of the year, especially because that's when a lot of things are going on. But keep in mind and keep a list somewhere of the types of competitions you want to do. There's things like duck stamps or books or artist of the year, things like that. Whether or not you think that you can get in, it doesn't matter. We all think less of our own work than it really is, and it's frustrating, but it's the way that it is. I do it too. Half the time I feel like I can't paint, so it hits us all. But as far as art competitions, it never hurts to, if you know what kind of artwork that you want to get out there and what kinds of competitions you're looking for, start working on those pieces early so that they're already prepared and ready to go, and you can send out samples. But be prepared also to spend money, because a lot of those actually charge fees to apply to them. So be prepared for that and how much you can afford. I suggest keeping a list somewhere. I have a favorites website favorites that I save through Chrome, so that I can find them quickly, and I mark them on my calendar when it's something that I may want to join. So it's one way to ensure you don't miss them, and you're not always going to have time to get a painting done last minute. So it's a good idea to try to pre-prep some of that. But also, as you're looking for these things, take a look at what people in the past have done on the work. Who's won before, so you can get a feel for what they may be looking for, and tailor your stuff to that. But still within your style, of course. Make sure you're happy with what you're doing. You don't want to be miserable doing it. Hi, Nora. I'm glad you joined us. I'm just working on a reproduction of an old painting for a client. So, not my usual stuff. Be sure to join me again sometime for my usual type of work. And just getting some base layer paints in here. I don't expect it to be anything perfect right now, that's for sure. And that's the best thing about oils too. Josie, where you were asking me before, they are the most forgiving medium out there out of anything, except for digital, of course. That is, of course, the most forgiving. But in fact, speaking of digital, I actually use quite a bit of digital when it comes to planning a painting, because it just makes my life easier. The one thing that's going to make any painting suddenly not make sense, and almost every time, is going to be that the lighting is off. The lighting will be coming from the left for one part and from the right for another part, and it just makes no sense. So you have to pay attention to where your lighting is coming from each and every time. That is incredibly vital. And just for fun, I'll show you what my palette looks like right now. I like to put down a lot of paints because I work on a lot of paintings sometimes at the same time. I don't like having to deal with a minimalist painting palette like a lot of people do. So I will use anything from a cheap palette. One of my favorites to use is a tempered glass cutting board. That has been one of the most useful that I have come across when it comes to palette, because I can scrape it off very easily using a knife. I mean a box cutter. Blah, I can't talk. But, you know, the downside too with any painting, which I think any of us that paint know, is that you're always going to have that ugly stage of the painting, which is what I would call this right now. But remember to always have faith in yourself. There is a process to it. You got to get those initial layers down first, especially with oil. There's always the initial layers that you've got to struggle through first. And then keep in mind, you always want to go dark to light. Last thing you should be doing is whites. If you're going to be doing any whites, like in the white of the eye, make sure the rest of the eye is done first. Otherwise, things get muddy. Oh, good. I'm glad yours is too, Josie. I'd show you my other ones. I actually have 3 palettes going right now. They all look the same to varying degrees, but, you know, I get a little crazy when it comes to my palettes. But like I said, with your process, always start from the furthest distance thing. You may see over this way, this is the horizon. That's further behind, and the sky's further behind than these trees. So I did that first. I'm doing the furthest most trees, which are on the blue shades, right around through here first. When it comes to trees, then I'm going to come in with the middle ones, which are a little bit more on the yellow, and then right over here some green ones. You can't really see it too well because I've got this zoomed in, but maybe that helps a little bit through here. The last thing that I'll be doing is the horses, and that's because they overlap everything. And I don't want to have to fight around the horses to do the trees, because the trees are so blotchy as far as how I do them. So always be thinking about how you don't have to work around whatever's on top. If you have to work around it, then it's going to be it's just going to be more difficult. You're going to lose some of the outer edges that you may be proud of already, or you may get a crazy blend with a color that doesn't work, that you won't like. It's just a safer way to go about it. Oh, thank you so much, Josie. I really appreciate that. It's always nerve-wracking when you're doing a commission for somebody that's so vastly different than what your normal is. And like I said, anybody who's watching right now, whenever you get a chance to, toward the end of this, if you go to my gallery through Instagram, the companion piece to this one is posted finished. And so this is the last one for this one, for this commission. I'm also working on a couple other things, like I've got a memorial portrait I'm working on currently as well. I'm very proud of that one. It's a family member who wanted it done, and hopefully he's not. I don't think he's watching, but he keeps saying he's going to pay me, but I'm not going to let him. But don't tell him. Let's see. Get through here. I'm trying to bring in some. This is a further back tree, so I'm trying to bring in some of the blues and darken some of these areas. I'm counting on this red because I know it's going to darken this too. And he's got a lot of marks here that are very vertical, so I'm going to start working some of that in here. I'm kind of turning my brush as I go because it moves the paint and gives it a smeared look a little bit more so, and that matches some of what he's got on here. That's very challenging. One of the other brushes I like to use a lot is, grab this one. This is kind of it's an oval mop brush. They're very, very soft. I'm having to bend it around to break up the bristles. Oh my gosh, this thing is the best thing in the world. I use it for two things. One is to put paint down, because it does a beautiful job with things like this area here that's a little bit more scribbled, speaking of which I need to get a little more purple in that. Sorry, one sec. There we go. Okay, but it's technically kind of a filbert shape at the top where it's got the rounded oval. And this guy in this section has a lot of vertical mark that's a little bit darker, so I'm trying to get some of that in. I'm grabbing some Dioxazine purple as well. Oh, I love that color. I use it for a lot of things. Not only to darken, but also it's a great color to muddy things down in certain tones that you're trying to get. Get some copal medium because I need a little bit more movement in the paint. It's starting to stiffen up just a little bit. Okay. And this is a little bit closer to the marks that I want. But he also has a little bit of green in there. Because I know how it's going to react with the blue, I'm going to go ahead and take some Viridian and bring it over here. Later I'll come in with a warmer red, and it'll actually dull it down nicely and color blend a little bit more like what he's got in here in the original one. In fact, let me go ahead and get a little bit of that. This one is a very pretty color. Dang, I have no idea what I did with my tube on that. But it's like an Indian red. But you'll see what I mean by bringing down some of the color. There we go. See how it kind of drops the depth quite a bit there? I'm going to use it up here as well. Because I know this is going to be black. I'm going to use the warm behind it. When I come back in later with the olive color, it's really going to drop that in depth, and I'll show you in just a split second here because I'm actually going to go ahead and get it done on that section. There we go. Alright, so now when I bring in the black, instead of it just being a dull black, it's actually going to stand out more because of that warm red underneath it. And I've got to get it all kind of crazy splotchy here. That's the way he's got it. Trying to get a curved branch there, a little bit of a top off there, and then he gets really light and splotchy through here. So you can see it makes that a lot darker. In fact, since I'm at the stage for some of this area up here, I'll go ahead and start bringing in some of that same shape here. I'm using this one because right now for this part because it actually matches some of the line work that he's got. I'm just trying to keep the same places and movements. And I'm not too worried if I mess it up because, in fact, you know what? Just for fun, let me show you what I can do to fix if I have an error. Let me find the right brush. Where'd you go? I have a lot of brushes. I actually have probably closer to a little over 100, but some of them are so old that they're from my college days. To give you an idea, I graduated in 05. Okay, so when it comes to a mistake, and although I kind of like that mark, I'm going to squeeze it a little bit further up. Let me get my liquid. That's the god-awful click sound at the top. See, I hate these. You push down. There. Excuse me. Alright, so you can see the color maybe a little bit. It's actually very, you know what, let me show you what it looks like whenever you get it out. It's very gelatiny. So, here I just squeeze a little bit. There. That's what it looks like. It's very gelatiny, right? There's a little bit of extra fluid there, but don't let that worry you. So whenever I've got a mistake, I grab just a tiny amount of liquid, and I'll take a dry brush. Well, I say dry, it's got liquid on it. And then I'll just come up underneath it and just move it down. The brush will carry off the excess and move it. See what I mean? I do this for whiskers all the time. And because it's liquid, it'll dry quickly, so it won't cause any trouble. So see what I mean about moving it. Fantastic for whiskers or other long hairs that you're doing if you need to make a repair. Or on anything you need to make a repair. And this one is just an angled brush. I'm just using it for the sake of demonstration. Alright, and because this is wet on wet, I am just working some of the shape in here. Here. Alright, back to my other brush. I like it because it's it will give me a little bit wilder of a edge. Because it's a little on the older side. It's splayed in a couple places. I have overused it. Alright. I'm going to come back in later in some of these areas and add some green. Some viridian type green, because I want it to cool it down. But I don't want to mix it too heavily with the red or it will muddy it. So that's just, I just got to trust my process, know that I'm going to come back to doing that. There we go. And there's also a little bit of sky space that shows through here. And, you know, although I've painted over that, I'm not too worried. I'll just come back in and add on some of the sky there later. So not a big deal. Most forgiving medium out there. And if I get a mark that's too heavy and I want to cool it off or you know, wind it down just a little bit, I just a dry mop brush. I can come in here and just very gently touch it and move it around, and you can see how that blends. So fantastic stuff. I love my brushes. I have so many. It's gotten to the point where they know me by name up at the art stores, both at Michael's, Hobby Lobby, and Azel Art Supply. Oh, I love Azel. Azel's a great one if you're in the Dallas area. If you buy online, Jackson's is fantastic for prices. One of my all-time favorites is Jerry's Artorama too. All wonderful prices. And very quick shipping. Unlike Amazon, they don't send it in a friggin' envelope. So you don't get, if you buy paper or anything else, you don't get that kind of bent edge that you get with buying from Amazon. It made me really sad whenever I had this really expensive pad of paper come in. Watercolor paper, no less. And I could not use it because all the ends were bent to hell. Gotta love it, right? Let's see, where did I do my other brush? I seem to have misplaced a brush. I do that often, unfortunately. Where did you go? Haha, found you. It's a big brush, too. I don't know how I missed it. Alrighty. So, I want to lighten up some of the blue that I have here. And come back into a couple places. Let me just grab a couple colors here. There we are. A little bit of liquid. Almost got the color I want. Alright, so I'm going to lighten up a couple spots. Whoop. It pulled over another color next to it. Sorry, hold on. When I get it too thin and I'm working wet on wet, what'll happen is it'll pick up too much of the color next to it. So if I start seeing that happen, I don't worry about it. I just know that I'm going to come back to it later. See, it's still too dark. Not a big deal. I'll just come back to that later. But I can still use this color in other areas where I need it. So that's what I'm going to do. I mean, I already have it mixed, right? There's actually a much lighter edge. It's around. All right. Sorry about that, guys. Unfortunately, what happens is it gives you a timer of an hour and then it drops. So, sorry about that. I always forget and I lose track of time, and you know how it happens. All right, so let me get some more cocoa medium here so I can get some spreading of quick color. Thanks for joining me again, Aaron. I appreciate that. There we go. It's a little bit lighter down here, so I'm going to start working in this color. He's got a little bit more watercolory looking, so I'm not too worried about if it looks scribbled in. I can just blend in some other color with it. Not a big deal. Especially right there. Alright, coming back in with some purple now. Oops, not quite enough of it on my brush. Get some more. Okay. I'm not too terribly worried if I get a color just a little bit off. I can easily correct it later. That's why I love glazing. Glazing where you take a color, mix it down really thin, like you're almost all liquid or medium, and just use a dry brush over an already painted section, and it'll make it more luminescent. It'll drop the color to the shade that you want if it's too bright. It does all kinds of beautiful things. So I love glazing. It's saved me on more than one occasion. In fact, there's a good example of it with one of my leopard posts for one of my oil paintings I'm actually still working on. I had to put it on hold because I am working on a few commissions right now. Where'd that other one go? Come here, shade. There we go. Sorry, just mixing color. Especially if you want something to be darker than it is. I'm trying to stick with his angle that he has for his brush. And I don't want there to be a whole lot of dappled white spots just through here, so I'm just kind of doing a little bit of a color blend. There we go. It's starting to come together a little bit. It'll take time. I think I'll need at least one more layer on this for it to make me happy. I don't expect it to all come together at one time, so I'm not too worried. There's one particularly dark patch right there. I'm just marking it for right now so I can come back to it later. Okay. Now, before I get too carried away with things that are too dark, I'm going to start coming over here and building in these tones. Just one sec. Mix my color. It's still not quite bright enough. There we go. Let's try that. That's a bit better. It needs to be a little more pink though. I have a rose madder that's beautiful. It needs this luscious, warm pink. I love it. Alright, so starting to get that tone built up a bit. I'm going to actually put some blue in behind it. And that's going to turn some of the edges of this purple. That's part of why I'm doing the red first, is because I love how it will, since I'm working what on wet, how it's going to come out whenever I put the two colors next to each other. But I gotta clean my brush first. One second. Actually, let me just grab another one. We'll just make this easier. Alright, so the blue I'm using, that I need to use now, is going to be really light in color. Get something mixed here. And, because I know it's going to use some of the red next to it. There we go. See how it comes out purple? There we go. I want a little darker on this side. And up here, I'm using this one. I'm kind of pressing down to on the tip to get the texture that he's got. Unfortunately, doing that does destroy your brush, but I have one that it's already destroyed, so I'm not that terribly worried. Hey, Poppy. My dogs come up looking for attention. There we go. Alright. Hopefully she doesn't climb on my leg like she usually does. Oh, she bumped into my camera stand. Sorry, guys. She likes to do that. My other one, Serafina, who is a Border Collie mix, she's very fond of coming over and just shoving my light around with her nose. She thinks it's funny. Especially when I need it. She's so goofy. Love her. Both of them are also on my Instagram page. You can see how cute they are. Alright, just the best thing to do in the first stages is just to get as much color as you can in. It doesn't matter how right or wrong it is, because you can always fix the tone. You can always add more texture on top. Oh, does she? That's what my chair looks like. My dog chews my chair. I have 3 different chairs, and the only one untouched is the one that has a metal base to it. I'm pretty sure she's probably tried on that one too, though, honestly. It's terrible. And hi again, Josie. I'm glad you joined me again. You know, Instagram has a timer on these things, and I lose track of time easily when I'm painting. I'm sure you do too. Bringing in these blues here as much as I can, just very gentle, very subtle. I'm actually using my liquid too, because you know, the further something is away from you, the more blue that it is. But it's also can't be too blue to get that atmospheric perspective. It's kind of a muddier blue. Trying to keep that little lip on there like he's got it. There we go. Later on I'll come over with some more dark marks to work that in a little better. Make it a little heavier. Trying to work in between where I know there's going to be some bright yellows. I'm not going to work on those yellows yet, because what happens when you mix yellow and blue? Yep, that's right, you get green. So I'd rather do that whenever I'm not doing wet on wet. Not unless I was actually trying to get green anyway, I guess. Alright, it's a bit softer of an edge, so I'm actually just rotating my brush here, because he's got it very watercolory looking, and so I'm trying to mimic that by just very gently squiggling my brush. This is a brush that's already been destroyed a couple of times, so I'm not exactly worried about damaging it doing it this way. If this were canvas, whew, it would eat the brush up like crazy. Thankfully, it's just panel. It's got kind of this weird looking, almost like a well tail there. A little bit of a point here, with a tiny amount of texture. Oh, sorry, I'm missing out on stuff. Let's see. How long will this later take for you to dry and paint on top? I will actually be able to work on this again tomorrow. Because I'm using drying agents, liquid, copal medium, thankfully it does a beautiful job of drying it very quickly. It won't take me long to work on it again. There might be a couple of areas that take longer, but also keeping in mind what colors dry faster than others. Browns are the fastest to dry, when it not just on here, but also on your palette. Then you've got blues, then greens, and then the reds. Whites last forever. Yellows do pretty damn good with lasting. But that's kind of the drying order. Fastest to slowest. So knowing that, this area is going to be dry very quickly. This area will probably be a little wet, a little bit longer, but not a big deal. If I have to, I'll wait another night and I'll just work on something else. But it always helps to keep in mind how fast certain colors dry. In fact, speaking of which, when you're talking about drying quickly, burnt umber and some of the other dark colors like the darker blues that dry too quickly, those unfortunately will dry flat because of how fast they dry. Don't let that worry you though, because whenever you add things, once it's dry, whenever you add things like a little bit of a liquid or linseed oil, which I don't suggest linseed oil if you want something to dry quickly, it'll actually make it keep from drying out for longer than you want. But I like to use just a tiny amount of liquid in a small area that I'm working at that time, and paint directly into it. And when I do that, I don't have to add it in on my palette to mix it directly into the paint. It's just already on the canvas, not a big deal. The reason for that is it makes your color that was there before, that's one of those faster drying ones that dries flat, it brings it back and makes it much easier to see what colors are actually there. Otherwise, it actually dries a completely different color than what you expect. And then whenever you varnish it later, all that color comes right back. It's all there, it's just because it dries flat. So any of your dark colors do that. The blues, the browns, the black, any of them, they all do it. But don't be worried if it's not looking the next day like the color you expect it to. It'll come back. You just have to trust that it will. And, you know, like I said, if you do need to bring any linseed oil into it, you use a very small amount. Very, 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 very small. You just dab a little bit on, and then you can brush it around with a very soft lint-free cloth and wipe off any excess. You want to have almost nothing on there. It takes very little to begin with. But working thin like this allows me to get through painting very quickly. I've done many a painting of a fair amount of size in 2 weeks or so. Further down in my gallery, you'll see a tiger. That thing is 10 by 20 inches on canvas, and I got that done in 2 weeks. So I mean, it's definitely possible. It doesn't take forever to work in oil. You just have to know how to make it work for you. And that also comes into play where you put your palette in the freezer, all of that, so you're not losing what you're working on already. Hope that helped. But yeah, your mediums are going to be your biggest source of help. He's got kind of this muddied down yellow here, and so I know it comes out just a tiny tad green, but I am going ahead with some of the yellow because this is actually Naples yellow. I'm going to use it as a background color and come back in later with brighter color yellow on top of it. Remember, always work dark to light. It'll make colors stand out a lot better. I'm not too worried about the directionality of my brush right through here because I know that I'm coming in with some more texture later. So all it needs right here is just color. Color and blending. And if you see too much pencil coming through an area where you're working very, with lighter colors, adding just a little bit of white into it turns it into opaque, so that you won't have as much of a problem with being able to see those pencil marks. See how you can see the pencil mark right here? Hopefully you can see that. If I were to add in just a little bit of white, and I mean a very small amount of white, it does not require much anything. Let me do that right now. And it would just, once you then cover it up, it's gone. See, I added white to the flesh tone. And I love using flesh tone with some of the other colors like blues and purples because it does muddy it down when you're talking about the initial layers. So it doesn't get an overwhelming color. Because the overwhelming colors where I need them, with the really bright yellow here in that tree, that will be one of the last things that I do. Dark to light, I'm telling you. The way to go. Well, hey Rhonda, I'm glad you joined. Hi Rachel. Sorry, the other video ended kind of abruptly. I always forget that there is a timer, and I like to work for a while in some evenings. Just bringing in some of these colors, some little wild things here and there, just to get something down. Keeping it soft because these are supposed to be very soft, subtle trees in the background. I'm bringing in just a little bit of white just to soften a couple other areas because he has that just very subtle in a couple places. There we go. There, that's starting to match a little bit more. Since he's got some of these branches that are kind of further in the background, I'm using a much softer color and tone so that it disappears into the distance. I don't want it to stand out as much. These are actually supposed to be much further away. Okay, and start bringing some of that over here. Where did that go? Here you are. Sorry, 1 second. Just trying to get color mixed. Okay. So there's a lot of peach and orange over on this side, so I'm just going to start working in a little bit of it here. This is a really bright area, so I'm going to leave it alone for now. And you can see, as I mentioned earlier to those that were watching, you can still see some of the pencil line through here, and whenever you mix in just a little bit of white, it will actually bring that back to an opaque so that you no longer see the line. See? Disappears. And I can always add more color on top of it later. I can do a glaze on it later. It's, you know, gives me more flexibility. Bring it down to him. Now, him, this is a guy right here. It's his head, his shoulder. I know it's hard to tell from the line work. You can see him up here, though. And his horses, those will be next to last. I will finish up the trees here first. Part of the grass and stuff right here behind the horses. Then I'll do the horses and this guy. And then I'll start working on the foreground. So I'm going to kind of go from left to right, back to front. If you think about it as a spatial, you know, out in the wild, I guess. I'm not sure how really to call it, but hopefully that makes sense. Let me grab some of my green. Here we are. For those that are interested in any other part of the video, I am going to add it to my story later, and hopefully it saves this time. Well, I didn't last time, which I was sad about, but whatever. And I'll add it to my YouTube channel as well, which you can find the link for in my profile. Words, they're so difficult. Good gracious. So just getting some color down for right now. I know I'm going to get the texture in later, so I'm not that worried if I get something wrong right now. This is just a base layer. No big deal. I'm trying to keep true to at least some of it for now, though. I want to get as close to the color as I can without necessarily having to worry about being perfect. Hey, Misty. Hope you're doing good. Sorry, I just noticed you there. Hope Taylor's doing good, too. Tell him I said hi. There we are. Just trying to work some red in. Since I'm doing this wet on wet right now, I'm just trying to get to blend quickly, move along quickly. I'll worry about mistakes later. And mixing some olive green with flesh tint. I love how the way that brings the color. I'll show you in just a second. Because it warms it up a little bit. And it looks really nice, I think. I actually need a little bit more of a blue shade on that corner. So let me start adding that in. Some of this area, the original artist has a little bit of a watercolor style to it. So I'm trying to keep my movements kind of, you know, random. A little bit of a smoothing as I go by just twisting and turning the brush. This kills the brush, so if it's an expensive brush, don't do it that way. Trust me, I use a lot of cheap brushes because some of my techniques just kill the brushes. There's no point spending a lot of money on those. There are other brushes I spend a lot of money on, though. Alright, so get a little bit more orange brown. I'll probably bring this to a close in just the next 10 to 15 minutes here. My arm's starting to get tired. There's a lot of orangey, kind of really dark orange over on this side, so get some of that worked in. A little bit of orange yellow. There we go. It's better. Dark to light, so that helps. Goes right through here. When I mix green in, it'll actually tone it down quite a bit. Nope, I need the wrong color green. Alright, one sec. Got ahead of myself on that one. There we are. Well, thank you so much, Josie. I really appreciate that. And I'm trying to get this one done by August 7th, so you'll probably see some more of this one. I'm expecting to be back tomorrow to work on a pastel of the snow leopard that you'll see in my gallery as well. It's actually very similar techniques when it comes to pastel, doing dark to light, and some of the other methods. So yeah, by all means, I'm going to try to do more of these. I look forward to seeing you again. Alright, I think I'll call it there right now. And actually I might work a little bit more purple in that one spot before I let that part go. I want it to stop in a position, in a spot that's will be easy to pick back up without having to worry about whether or not it's wet on wet. I always try to think about how I'm ending a painting for a sitting to make sure I will be in a good spot when I start again. There we go. Alright, so that'll help me identify where I left off because I could see where it is in the original painting. And so that's where I'll leave it. Guys, thank you so much for spending your time with me. And thank you for all your great questions, Josie. I really appreciate it. See you again soon. I'll be back tomorrow afternoon unless something gets in the way to work on a pastel. See you then.